Kia ora everybody, and welcome back to another Matariki podcast. Today we are joined with a special guest.
Kia ora koutou, ko Nita Ropati Riki ahau, and I am a resident of Otara and live in Perth Street.
Thank you. What was your main role in the Matariki event in Papa Toi Toi?
Okay, I suppose it was really for selfish reasons why I got involved. I really wanted to do a Matariki event in Otara. I didn't know what was available or who was doing anything, or was it anything being done, or I didn't feel that last year's one was particularly good for us as a community because it didn't have a community feel around it. And I had been sitting around with a couple of people that I've worked with in the community from the marae and on ONEC, and we talked about how it'd be really nice to do true community events, like having community do their own events and see how it went, and also encouraging whānau to, if there was any way of getting funding, to access funding to help support them to do an event. Yeah.
Thank you. What was your struggle through the whole process?
I think the struggle was that firstly, when you ask the question about whether or not people are interested in participating in a community event, you're asking people that you know will volunteer their time and also commit to being part of a conversation, because the conversation is about organising. So it's like when you're organising a birthday party. You don't just go in to have the food at the end of the party. You actually have to do all the prep work. So this was the same. So the people that I invited along, it was an open discussion. So anyone who turned up, once you turned up at the first meeting, the question I posed to everyone who was there was, okay, is everyone committed to being on the organising committee? And when people committed themselves, then that's when you can go ahead. So I suppose the first struggle is you've got to keep your fingers crossed that you can have people turn up to the first meeting. Because if you have no one turning up to the first meeting, then you're left on your own to do it. But we had a really good number of people. There was about 10 of us, 11 of us. And by the end of the whole 11 was still there, but there was more of a working group of 6 to 7 of us who did most of the work. And the big thing out of that discussion when we first started was that a couple of meetings later we were able to secure funding. And that was the catalyst for us to go ahead and do what needed to be done. And then the struggle was, how do you do it? Yeah.
Thank you. From your point of view, what would you say your highlight was from the Matariki event?
I think there's quite a few highlights. I think the highlight is knowing that ultimately in the end there are people within the community who have a good understanding about what needs to be done and how to complete those tasks so that you can produce a product. And I say it like it's like making a cake. You know, you've got all the ingredients and they all come together, and the oven part was when you're cooking it and you're baking it, is when you see that the community have got their stuff together and they're willing to put it out there in the community and they actually deliver. That's the highlight. That's the highlight when you see it happening and you see it coming forward. What you envisaged at the beginning is not necessarily what happens in the end, but you still have something that's come from the community, and the community are really, really happy with what they've done. and this is especially so for this year because it's the first time that it's ever been achieved by community for community, and they've had full control over what it would look like, how they want to do it, who they want to invite. So it was never ever, I believe that all the events that happened in Otara, it was never a closed invitation, it was always open. So anyone and everyone could participate in the event. So that was exciting as well.
Thank you. You have talked about the role you did this year. What about the role next year?
So that's really interesting considering we have to take into many factors, right? So this year I took on the role because no one else could and no one else was in a position to do that. So that role is bigger than just chairing a committee. You have to commit yourself to actively ensuring that your community has the right support systems, has the right resourcing. And when I talk about resourcing, I talk about if you've got a group that wants to apply for funding, you don't just give them the money. They have to fill in an application form. Well, we had no application form, so we had to create it. So all of that work goes into it as well. And I saw it as my role as, you could say, boss in charge or facilitator or chair or director, whatever word you give me in that role, I saw it as my role to make sure that all those little things were ticked off. And if I missed out on anything, the rest of the committee would say, oh, what about this? Well, what about that? Who's going to do this and who's going to do that? Or do you think we should do it this way? So it was a group effort, but my role was to ensure that all the boxes that needed to be ticked off were ticked off. So if you're talking about this year, last year, next year, what happened this year was unique, I think, because last year they had already set aside the funding for the Otara Papatoi local board did for Matariki. So there was money that was already allocated for 2023. And with that money, it was for both Otara and for Papatoi. So me as the director or facilitator for Otara Matariki, we only wanted to work with Otara community. And that's because we're Otara people. And that's because we didn't know the Papatoi community. But under the contract by the local board for this funding, we had to share the funding. So in doing so, we had to make sure that our Papatoi community were aware of the funding that was available. So we just put it out there. And plus we decided that, and we thought it was a good idea, that Otara would do the opening karakia for Matariki, and we would ask Papatoi to do the closing. And when we did that, we then gave Papatoi the opportunity to open it up for any other community groups within Papatoi to do whatever they wanted to do for Matariki. So the challenge there was that we could do Otara, that wasn't a problem, but the challenge was we didn't know Papatoi. And so what we thought was a really, really great idea for Otara was not necessarily something that Papatoi could do. So we just had to look at them as two totally different communities. The other thing too is that council has its own process. And that process is always about accounting for you. You've got an accountability process, and that's council. That's anyone who's got money and gives money away, they always want you to account for it. So we understood, the committee understood, that we had certain obligations to make sure that we could account for how the money was being spent. And prior to giving the money to our committee, the Auckland City Council was talking about cutbacks. They were wanting to cut off certain events that were happening in the community. And that's why we were really appreciative of the fact that the money was already here for the 2023. But I can't say that that's going to be available for 2024. I actually believe that there won't be any funding for 2024 because Auckland City Council has already said that they don't want to support events within the community. They want to cut those festival events out. So I'm not sure what's going to happen for 2024. But I do know that because this has been done and the Otara community has come to the front of being able to do what they do within their own community, and that is actually put activations out in the community, do events in the community, that we could quite easily do it again. Whether or not I want to play the role of facilitator in that in 2024, no. I'd gladly give it over to someone else who would like to do that role. It is a big job. It is a big task. And people get paid to run and do things that way, but this was all voluntary. It was done, the committee and my role was all voluntary. So if I was to also look at the Otara community, those on the committee's relationship with council. So council's role in it was that they had several people who work within council whose role is to engage with the community, whose role is that they manage certain facilities. So they're obligated as council employees to work with community. I have to say that as a community person and doing what we do for the community, we've got no qualms in saying to council, I know that's rubbish, that's not going to work. We're going to do it this way. So even though you've got council members who are sitting on the committee, ultimately as community we were able to say, well, actually we want to do it our way, and I'm sorry if you're employed by council and they're asking you to make this happen, that's not going to happen. And that was usually because in the community itself there was no one who wanted to do what council wanted them to do. They wanted to do their own stuff. They wanted it to look like theirs. They didn't want this 250k flash looking corporate thing that you could see. I'm not saying that some of them weren't beautiful, because they were, but this was truly a reflection of what happened within the community when you've got people who are learning how to do an event, to how to put funding applications together so that they can support the kaupapa that they want to do. Look internally within your own committee and say, oh, Nanny so-and-so, she's got the skills to do whāriki or weaving. We had the Otara Waterways and Lakes do an event with planting of trees, and the whole process of whānau connecting to the planting and as a memorial to their loved ones. So it did truly reflect what was happening in the community. It wasn't a corporate look at all. The learnings from it, from us as a community, if we want to improve how we deliver, then you actually have to have more time to do that. I think we had about maybe 8 to 9 weeks to organise it and to deliver it. I'm only saying that you need more time, because when you do more time, you can work with more people and negotiate, what they bring to the table in terms of their skills, the resources that they have, being able to confirm that we need marquees and, all the small stuff that makes an event really, really supportive of what the needs of the community are. So everybody obviously we've come to the end of doing the delivery of our events. Everyone has had huge learnings around the success of those events. They've all been really, really different. In terms of success. You know, how do you measure success? I measure success by the fact that people participated and they turned up and they enjoyed themselves and they were able to meet their neighbours. They were able to meet the other people who lived in their communities. They were able to share stories. They were able to remember about things that happened in Otara, or they are being able to bring their own tamariki to share in an event that's going to be a history for them. Yeah. So I think that for me is how we've been able to measure success. If you were to measure success from, you look at Facebook and you see all the advertising that happens around different Matariki events, we didn't have any of that. And that's because we didn't have the skill factor and the time and the people who are able to put that time into creating something really beautiful and flashy and so forth. But we still did what we wanted to do, and it was still successful, I believe. And for 2024, I think it could be built on. We could create the same and probably do it better, be more organised, be more supportive of groups, especially new ones who are applying for funding, but unfortunately we couldn't give them the funding because the effort that they had behind their application wasn't enough to support their activity. But I think that 2024, we've got more funding for it, we'll be able to do it.
Thank you so much, Nita, for your knowledge and wisdom today.
Kia ora.
And thank you everyone for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.